Hello, everyone. There we go. I think we'd all agree that economics is a complicated field, and it can be confusing. It's no surprise that a lot of people consider it to be a boring subject. But economics can be fun. And to show you that, we're going to be taking a look at an economy that on its face is nonsense, where keys are used to buy things and hats are highly sought after. It's an economy I personally have a lot of experience with, and there are a number of scholarly papers looking at it for its unique quirks. I'm talking about the player-to-player economy of the multiplayer online video game Team Fortress 2, published by Valve Corporation in 2007. It was originally a game you had to pay to play, but in 2010 it was made free to play and attracted millions of players. Even today, there are about 50,000 people playing at any given time. Ever since the ability to trade in-game items with other players was added, a highly sophisticated economy has emerged surrounding the game. But why should we look at it? I mean, it's fun, sure, but what's important about it? What can we learn from looking at this economy? Well, it comes from simple beginnings. It's a system based on barter, just trading items directly with other people. It's the most simple form of economics. But from these simple beginnings, players have made a number of innovations that have caused the economy to become as sophisticated as it is today. And because of that development from simplicity to complexity, it works well as a model of real-world economic development. A lot of real-world economies started with bartering, and works as a model of real-world economic issues as well. If you combine that with the fact that there's a huge amount of data on the transactions conducted around this game, it becomes very appealing as a subject of study. Before we can get into any economics, I need to give you just a short crash course on how the in-game item system works. As players play, they're rewarded periodically by receiving item drops, that is, random items that are added to their inventory. Usually you'll get weapons, but sometimes you'll be lucky and you'll get a hat or something similar, a cosmetic item that adjusts the appearance of your character. And because those things are more rare, they're more valuable. That's a fundamental principle of economics. Scarcity equals value. The more scarce something is, the more valuable it is. And for that same reason, weapons are the least valuable items in the game. Now, players get random items as they play, but there is also a crafting system in the game to make specific items that you want. The main ingredient for crafting is metal. If you smelt down 2 weapons, you can get 1 piece of scrap metal. Combine 3 of those, you can get 1 piece of reclaimed metal. Combine 3 of those, you can get 1 piece of refined metal. That's the big one that we're going to be talking about. And if you decide you want to break these down, then you can. You can break them down into their constituent parts if you want to make a simpler crafting recipe, for instance. Now that you know these basics, we can get into the actual economics, starting with problems with barter systems like the one TF2 has. The first and most significant of these is that in any barter transaction, there needs to be a double coincidence of wants. Both parties need to want something the other person has, or else the transaction can't go forward. Second, there's no common measure of value in a barter system. There's no way to say this thing is worth this much. It's all subjective. Third, goods are indivisible. If we agree that 1 sheep is worth 2 goats, I can't give you half a sheep for 1 goat. You see, cutting the sheep in half reduces its value. And lastly, goods are just bulky. It's difficult to store them. In TF2, that problem manifests in the players having limited inventory space in which to store items. All of these problems are solved by a currency. There's a lot that goes into an ideal currency, and I won't get into all these points, but if you think about these attributes in the context of dollars, you can see why they're a good form of currency. And if you think about it in the context of, for instance, I don't know, sand, you can see why it would make a bad currency. In history, precious metals were used as currencies because they had these sort of characteristics. And in TF2, an interesting sort of parallel is that metals are also used as currency because they're valuable to everyone. They can be used for crafting. They allow you to condense value by combining many weapons to make the metal. And they can be easily combined and divided into their component parts, into different denominations you see, like think of dollars and cents. So they've become the de facto currency for the community. Now that we have money, there need to be things we want to buy. This is going to be a little bit more game talk, just bear with me, it is essential for understanding the coming points. The main way rare goods come into the economy is through crates, like the one you see in the middle. These contain items that can't be gotten anywhere else, and players are given these crates as they play along with their other items. The only way to open a crate is with a key, like the one you see on the left. These come into existence by being purchased for $2.50 real money each in the in-game store. If you buy a key and you use it on a crate, the key's consumed and you get one of the items in the list. Or, as a 1% chance from any crate, the coveted unusual hat. A hat with an animated effect that really stands out. If you've ever heard of conspicuous consumption, buying things for the sole purpose of showing off your wealth, not for any practical reason, unusuals, as they're called, perfectly exemplify that. When you get to goods as rare as these, they become quite valuable because they're quite scarce. Remember that point I made, scarcity equals value. So it becomes unfeasible to purchase these with metal. It would be like trying to buy an expensive piece of jewelry with $1 bills. There just needs to be a higher denomination of currency than that. And keys have come to be used as that form of currency. They're valued by everyone, and they're relatively scarce because it takes $2.50 to make one, so they fit the bill perfectly. Normally, to conduct a trade with anyone, you would need to encounter them in the game and negotiate it. But if you're looking for something specific, that approach isn't really going to work. This is a problem that's been solved since the beginning of civilization, though, with bazaars, with marketplaces, and players have taken it upon themselves to make these marketplaces online to facilitate the trade of items. This is perhaps the most used one, backpack.tf. You can see here some of these prices that these are listed for. If you consider that a key is worth $2.50, these items are being sold for hundreds of dollars. This is serious business. Now we understand how the system basically works. We can talk about a problem with the system that emerges. Keys are created all the time by being purchased, and they're destroyed all the time by opening crates. So their scarcity doesn't really change. Their value doesn't really change. Add to that the fact that they're anchored to the dollar, and it, again, solidifies their value. Anchoring like this, well, by anchoring I mean every key is worth $2.50. They have a fixed price to them. And anchoring like this is also a concept in real life foreign currency exchange. A country might say, our currency is worth this much of this country's currency as a way of strengthening it. Metal, on the other hand, is created all the time, but it's very rarely destroyed. Theoretically, it should be destroyed through the crafting recipes I mentioned earlier, but in reality, those are very inefficient. Here's just an example of some of them. On the right, you can see the ingredients involved in the recipe. In the middle, you can see the weapon that it makes. And on the right, you can see the cost of that weapon in terms of weapons. Despite every weapon being of equal value in the eyes of the market, some of these can require more than a dozen weapons to craft. So there's really not any incentive to do this. And because metal just keeps increasing in quantity, it results in inflation. Currency becoming less valuable as more of it exists. This chart shows how much refined metal it took to purchase a key over time. You can see from about 2011 to 2012, it was a little over 2 refined metal for a key. By mid-2014, it had shot up to over 8 refined metal for a key. This is a humorous post someone made around the time of buying a key in 2 years in reference to the real-life phenomenon where in times of serious inflation, people would literally cart their money around in wheelbarrows to get it from place to place. But little did this person know exactly how right they really were, because now, in 2019, the price of a key is more than 5 times greater than it was in 2014. To put this in perspective, inflation's healthy when it's around 2 to 3%. That is, when prices increase by about 2 to 3% every year. It's healthy because it stimulates demand. If you know your money isn't going to be worth as much in a year, you're incentivized to spend it right now instead of holding on to it. So it keeps money flowing through the economy. But of course, the inflation rate of metal has greatly outpaced this, at times reaching as much as 100% over the course of a year. How can we deal with inflation? There are a few ways governments deal with it. One way is increasing wages proportionally to inflation. If money has less purchasing power, you can just increase the amount of money in the economy. That helps to counteract the effects. In this context, that would be done by Valve giving players more items as they play. But this approach requires a level of inflation that's nearly healthy to begin with. If you have high inflation already, doing this can just exacerbate the problem. Another approach is contractionary monetary policy. That's a pretty scary sounding term, but all it means is reducing the amount of money in the economy. If something's more scarce, it's more valuable. If you make money more scarce, it's worth more. This is done in real life through things like increasing interest rates and other ways that the government can reclaim money. In TF2, it would be something like a metal sink, something that incentivizes players to destroy a huge amount of refined metal for some sort of reward. Unfortunately, though, as a company and not a government, Valve doesn't really have any incentive to do those things. It's to their advantage if players need to buy the $2.50 keys to participate in the highest circles of the economy. And so the currency of the wealthy, that is, the people who have bought into the game with real money, has a stable value. The currency of the people who play the game for free, the poor, is constantly decreasing in value, and this leads to an increasing gap in wealth. This is a negative trend that's been going on for some time, but now I'd like to discuss a specific incident that's impacted the economy recently, and what some have called the final nail in the coffin for the TF2 economy, the Krait Depression. In July of this year, a bug was introduced with crates. I mentioned earlier that the chance of getting an unusual from a crate was 1%, but for just a day until this bug was fixed, the chance of getting an unusual was increased to 100%. And as you can imagine, this sent people into a frenzy. They opened as many crates as they could. They bought loads of keys. Players were selling crates to each other for ridiculous prices. And in the end, unusual hats, which were once so valuable, were worthless overnight. This is a textbook market crash. Some shock occurred to the economy. People wanted to cash out. People saw other people cashing out, so they wanted to cash out as well before the prices got even lower. And overall, it left the economy much worse for wear. How do you deal with crashes like this? There's a short-term way and there's a long-term way. The short-term way is instituting trading curbs. This means stopping all trading for a certain period. It lets everyone catch their breath, decide what they want to do, so they don't just sell frantically and plummet and make prices plummet. And Valve did this. In the wake of the bug, they made all the unusual hats obtained from the bug untradeable until they could decide what to do. Another way, a way of actually solving the problem, or at least mitigating its effects, I should say, is, injecting capital into the economy. You might know these as bailouts. Their purpose is to keep certain people and institutions afloat in times of crisis. So, because if those people or institutions went bankrupt, then it would have negative consequences for many other people. To a certain extent, Valve did this as well. They issued refunds for any keys purchased during the time. These are the ways governments can deal with it, but unlike with inflation, in this scenario, in this situation, Valve was able to deal with this problem better than any government could because they had direct control over goods. They wanted to strike a balance between player happiness and economic health, so they decided to make only the first unusual everyone obtained from the bug tradable. It let people enjoy the unusual hats they got, and while the event did end up having some impact on the economy, it was greatly reduced. Sometimes interventions like this from a governing body can be quite helpful. And that gives us the state of the economy today. Growing wealth inequality, a market recovering from a crisis, and no chance of engaging with the highest circles of the economy unless you invest a significant amount of time or money. But while it might not be so feasible to actually participate in this economy today, it's still valuable, very valuable, as a subject of study. And I hope looking at it has given you some insight into why our economy works the way it does. Thank you.